On the morning of November 21st, 2016, in Knoxville, Tennessee, Jill Walker was doing her normal morning routine. She was washing the dishes, getting ready for work, making her morning coffee. But as the morning went on, she realized that her 16-year-old daughter, Emma Walker, hadn't come out of her room to leave for school yet. So Jill kind of just assumed that maybe she overslept, so she walked in her room and saw Emma sleeping on the bed and called out her name. Emma Walker was 16 years old and currently in her junior year at Central High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. She had big dreams of becoming a neonatal nurse after high school and worked really hard every day in school to try and achieve that because she was also an honors student. She was also on the cheerleading team. And even though she was very dedicated to her studies, she also made time to have a social life and hang out with her friends and go to parties and just typical high school things. And on top of her balancing her studies and her social life, Emma even had a part-time job to which she would go to school, go to cheer practice, go to work, and then go to sleep, and then start the whole process over again. And the reason why she had a part-time job is because she was currently saving up for a car so that she'd be able to commute to and from college after high school. So already Emma was really planning a very fruitful life for herself. Emma had a very bubbly and outgoing personality. I feel like if you're a cheerleader, you kind of have to have that school spirit personality, and that's definitely how Emma was. She had tons of friends and everybody felt so safe around her and felt that she was very kind and loving, which is ironically the main traits that you need to become a nurse. So Emma overall was a really good kid, and so this morning when Jill found that she wasn't up yet for school, she saw this as a little bit odd because Emma was the type of girl that actually loved getting ready for school. It was one of the highlights of her day. She loved waking up early and doing her makeup and her hair and picking out an outfit. So when Jill walked into her bedroom, she called out her name, but there was no response. So Jill called out Emma's name again, but was met with no response. And at this point, Jill sees Emma sleeping on her bed, but she notices that Emma is kind of a little bit too still. So Jill walks over to Emma, and when she flips Emma over, that's when she sees blood coming from the side of Emma's head. And when Jill put her fingers to Emma's neck, she unfortunately had no pulse. So after this, Jill immediately calls the police.
What's going on there?
I just tried to wake up my daughter for school, and she has no pulse.
Stay on the line. I'm transferring you to Rural Metro.
Rural Metro, can you tell me what's going on? She's non-responsive. She's gone. Okay, is she breathing? No. Her tongue's hanging out of her mouth. Is she laying on her back? Yes.
But unfortunately, when police arrived, 16-year-old Emma Walker was already dead on scene. As far as the crime scene, just looking at it, the police were very puzzled as to how Emma could have passed away. They were assuming, she was laying in her bed, and when they discovered her body, there really wasn't much blood at all. There was just blood coming from the side of her face. So they assumed that maybe she had a bad seizure in her sleep or maybe an aneurysm. And so the police start to investigate her room a little bit more, and that's when they find a little pool of blood onto her pillow, which made sense because there was blood coming from the side of her face. But when they pick up the pillow, they notice that there is a hole in the wall behind where her pillow is. And this wall that they found the hole in was actually facing the backyard. So the police go out to the backyard, go up to that wall, and from the outside, they see two bullet holes pointed directly underneath Emma's window and into her bedroom. And when the police look a little bit closer, just a couple feet away from the wall on the ground, they found bullet casings. When an autopsy report was done on Emma's body, they found that her cause of death was a bullet wound to the head. They did find a couple of odd things, such as on Emma's body, there was no defensive wounds or anything like that, as if someone had broken into the house and tried to do this to her. And even on Emma's body, there was not much blood at all. There was no bruising or any signs of a fight. It literally seemed like whoever had done this walked behind the house, shot twice in the wall, and then just walked away. So to get a better understanding of who might have done this, that's when police start talking to Emma's Emma's friends. And that's when her friends go on to say that they actually do have one person in mind that could have done this, and it could have possibly been Emma's ex-boyfriend, 18-year-old William Riley Gall, because the two of them had actually just broke off their 2-year relationship about a couple weeks prior to this, and then for the past couple days, Emma's been receiving very threatening text messages from an unknown number. William Riley Gall actually met Emma when William was in his junior year and Emma was in her freshman year, and they actually met because William was on the school's football team and Emma was a cheerleader, and she was actually the only freshman that was guaranteed a spot on the team. And then they ended up dating for about 2 years until Emma was in her junior year, but then they had officially broken up not too long before this. And I know that William's name is William Riley Gall, but for some reason he goes by the nickname Riley, and even in some of his tweets that I'm going to show you later, his Twitter handle says Riley. So to make things a little less confusing, I'm just going to refer to him as Riley for the rest of this video. So currently Emma was a junior at Central High School in Knoxville, whereas Riley was actually going to Maryville College and he was in his freshman year as a wide receiver for their football team. So the date of Emma's murder was on Monday. So that's when the police bring in Riley for an interrogation to get his whole recap of what he was doing the entire weekend. He claims that on Friday night he had actually spent the night at his grandparents' house. And so he spent the night there, and then the next day on Saturday, that's when he had stopped by his friend Noah's house to spend the night at his friend Noah's house. But Riley claims that while he was at Noah's house, that's when he got a FaceTime call from Emma, and at this point they weren't really talking because they were separated at this point, but Emma FaceTimes Riley and she is in a panic, and she says that there is a man dressed all in black and he's circling around the house. She's home alone and she thinks he's trying to break in because he keeps on messing with the windows and the doors. And so she's calling Riley, telling him all of this and asking if he could come over just to look around. When Riley shows up, no one was there, so he just went back to Noah's house. And this experience was actually really traumatizing for Emma because shortly after Riley left, Emma called one of her friends to tell them what she just experienced, and even on the phone to her friend, she had told her, quote, "I thought I was going to die." And there was actually footage of this man dressed all in black from a neighbor's camera, and you can literally see this man all dressed in black just walking past Emma's house. So then Riley claims that this Saturday night, after he had tried to figure out everything with Emma, he went back to Noah's house, and then he was at Noah's house. He spent the night from Saturday to Sunday, and then Sunday morning he went to his grandparents' house, and then he went back to Noah's house, and he stayed at Noah's house until around 11:30, 11:45 p.m., and that's when he went back to his student dorm because he had class the next day. This is kind of the part of Riley's story that starts to get really mixed up because he claims that Sunday night, which would have been the same night as Emma's murder, he claims that he got back to his campus dorm around like 11:30, 11:45, and he had homework to do. So he was going to log into his student portal, do some homework, but then realized that he couldn't log into his student portal because he was still logged into his student account on his grandparents' computer. And for some reason, I guess you can only be logged into your student account like one computer at a time. So to this, he decided to drive back to his grandparents' house. And this was not like a quick trip down the street. This was a whole 40 minutes out of his way. So he went back to his grandparents' house, drove a whole 40 minutes simply just to log out of his student portal and then leave again. But Riley claims that when he went to his grandparents' house, he was actually seen by his grandfather logging out of his student portal. And so the police ask him, instead of driving out there 40 minutes there, 40 minutes back, you're over an hour, you're getting home at 2 a.m., why didn't you just call your grandparents and ask them to sign out of your account? And to this, Riley claims that the reason he didn't call them was because he didn't want to wake them up, because at this time it was 12:30, which again is very confusing because he literally just claimed that he got home at latest 11:45. So what had he been doing for 45 minutes? Like, don't you think he would have realized right away that he was logged out of his student portal if he really did do homework as soon as he got back? But he claims that he didn't want to wake up his grandparents by calling them, and so he was just gonna drive over there and wake up them anyways because he needed to get into the house. and that's how his grandfather had seen him logging out of his student portal, because he had to wake up one of his grandparents in order to get inside. So already this is a little odd. And then the craziest part, he claims that he went out to his grandparents' house, logged out of his student portal just so he could do homework, and then he claims that he came back to his dorm around like 1:30, but he didn't even go up to his dorm and do his homework, because instead he claims that from 1 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. he just sat in his car and cried because him and Emma had just broken up. So he said that he wanted to cry it out for a couple of hours. He was looking at pictures of them and just reminiscing. And when Riley was asked, like, okay, did anyone see you during this time? Like, did anybody walk out and make eye contact with you? Ironically, Riley says no. He said throughout that entire time that he was down there, he didn't see any students, he didn't see any teachers, he was literally just by himself. So then about an hour into Riley's interrogation is when the police start questioning him about Emma's death specifically. And for someone who was in a 2-year relationship, Riley seems to not care or not ask any questions about Emma's death. He knows nothing about Emma's death right now. Nobody has told him anything. The police hasn't told him anything. The hospital hasn't told him anything. He's only been hearing things from his friends. And Riley even claims that his friend had called Riley at like 7 in the morning the next day, and he's the one that gave Riley the news that Emma was dead. And there was also one point in this questioning where Riley actually slips up and mentions a detail that no one knew about the crime scene yet. Oh, well, I don't understand how the bullet had killed her when it was just a stray bullet. And the detectives are like, wait, a stray bullet? How would you know that? And that's when Riley claims, oh, well, I don't know if it's a stray bullet. Like, it was just a rumor that I heard. And what makes this even weirder is that this wasn't actually a rumor. This was actually a detail about the crime scene that no one knew about except for the killer, most likely. And the entire time, Riley is very persistent on that he just doesn't understand how Emma could have died, because it would make more sense if the bullet went through the wall and instead just hurt her and not actually kill her. He has not asked one question about Emma. Do you guys know how she died? Do you guys know where she's at? Where's the funeral? Where's her family? Like, nothing. He was literally just so adamant on making sure that he didn't say too much. And neither does Riley look very angry or persistent throughout all of this. If someone had murdered your significant other, I feel like your main priority would be to try and find the killer. He was not sad. He was not crying. He was not anxious. He was literally just way too calm, which I think maybe Riley had done this on purpose to try to make himself appear very calm and chill and not over the top so that it doesn't seem suspicious. But him being the boyfriend for 2 years and not showing any emotion is a lot weirder than if he were to be showing tons of emotion. Riley also goes into another detail that was not revealed. Riley said that the only way that he can understand that how Emma could have died is if someone had snuck in through the backyard, because Emma's window, as I said, was actually facing the backyard. And that was another thing that wasn't mentioned about the case yet, that the bullets were facing the backyard. And Riley ironically says, well, I feel like the only way it would work is if someone actually went through the backyard and went through the gate. So I think, like, if I were to know how it happened, it probably happened like that. This man claims to just be hearing rumors when he never actually says who he heard these rumors from. And all of these rumors that he's saying aren't even rumors. They're literally just facts about the case that nobody knows about yet, except for the police and the potential killer.
Heard she just passed in her sleep. Heard she tried to commit. I heard a stray bullet came through the wall, but that made no sense to me because it's her room. If a stray bullet hit the wall, it would have to be from the backyard because that's where her window is. So I don't know, that one didn't make sense to me, but those are the main three.
One critical thing that Riley forgot to mention, oddly, was that on Friday night, between him going to his grandparents' house and then going and hanging out at Noah's house, he was actually kidnapped. Riley claimed that he was kidnapped by two masked men and never told this to the police. Even during Riley's interrogation, he never told this to the police. When he was explaining his Friday night, he was just like, oh yeah, I went to my grandparents' house and then I went to Noah's house and that's pretty much it. But before all of this, the police were actually talking to Riley's best friend, Noah, the man that he was going to see for the weekend. And Noah told the police that on Friday night, when Riley came back to his house, Riley was extremely frantic. He was pacing back and forth. And he claimed that as he was walking down the street, he was pushed into a dark car with two other men.
Much about it, I just remember two guys. Literally, I was Friday night before I got to Noah's, went up to my stepdad's house, and I pulled in the driveway, and this van pulled over across in the semicircle, and these two guys were like walking across the street. Didn't think anything of it because they weren't like in a rush. And I turned around, I'm about to get in my car, and next thing I know, one of them grabs my back, and the other one's around the corner, and they just like put their hands over my face and just took me to their van or whatever.
And by saying the words whatever and having a very calm demeanor in this story shows a lot about Riley's involvement and how much he really cares. Again, I feel like he's trying to keep a calm and collected personality to try to not make himself look too suspicious. But if you're talking about a traumatic event like getting kidnapped and you're just sitting there very calm, collected, and it just happened 3 days ago, that is a bit concerning. If he finds out that Emma was murdered, don't you think the first thing he would think about was the scary masked men that had done something terrible to him, and maybe they might be the ones that did this to Emma? And Riley goes on to say that the entire time he ironically couldn't remember anything, he couldn't see anything, he couldn't hear anything. We don't know why he can't see anything because he never mentions if anything was put over his eyes. And then he said that after he was kidnapped, he was pushed out of the car and in this like random pit. And when he tried to get up and started looking around, he had no clue where he was. Riley never claims if these men had stole anything from Riley, like never stole his money, never stole his clothes or his shoes. Riley never even mentioned if these two masked men had beat him up in any sort of way. You would think that if someone's gonna do something that drastic and that crazy to someone, they would probably want to get something out of it, like money or something on him, like shoes or clothes. But no, Riley says he was literally just put in this car, couldn't see for some reason. Maybe this man just closed his eyes and forgot to open them. He couldn't hear anything, he couldn't feel anything, so clearly he wasn't getting like beat up or anything. And around this time, it was like 11:30 p.m. And ironically, around this time of 11:30 p.m. is when Emma was going over to a friend's house after a football game to hang out with a couple of her friends, because that Friday night her school had had a home football game and she was cheering at the football game, and then afterwards everyone was going over to this one friend's house and she decided to join them. When she showed up to the home, Emma was receiving some really scary text messages. Go to your car with your keys. Go alone. I've got someone you love. If you don't comply, I will hurt them. We have him now. ... If you don't care about him anymore, then it shouldn't bother you. Call the police and he dies. Your choice. If you'd like to hear his final screams, give me a call. And the next one, after Emma didn't reply, this unknown person then says again, quote, he's in a ditch beside the house. It's a shame you can all of a sudden not value someone else's life. Why would they say it's a shame you don't value their life? Like, why would they? They have no clue who this person is. They have no clue who they have. And isn't the person that's sending this text message the one holding them hostage? So aren't they technically the ones that don't care about someone else's life? And so shortly after this, Emma just ignored the text. And then all of a sudden, this number actually calls Emma. So Emma picks it up, and on the line, she hears Riley screaming in the background before the call is dropped. And weirdly, she can hear these screams a little bit louder. And even after the phone call is ended, she's still hearing Riley's screams. So she walks out to the kitchen, looks in the backyard, and sees Riley in the backyard of this friend's house that she was at. So Emma and her friend run outside. They go up to Riley. They're like, "Why are you here in my friend's backyard?" And that's when Riley starts looking around. He starts looking really confused, and he says, "I don't know. I was just kidnapped by these two guys, and they just dropped me off in this ditch." And Emma's like, "In my friend's backyard?" And Riley's like, "Yeah, I guess. I mean, I couldn't see anything. I couldn't hear anything. I just was dropped off here." So Emma immediately knows what's going on. "Leave me alone and don't ever talk to me again." Emma turns around, walks back into her friend's house. Her friend follows her, leaving Riley by himself in the backyard. And then after this is then when Riley went over to Noah's house and frantically told him the story about how he got kidnapped just now. And Riley said that he didn't want to go to the police and he didn't want to tell anyone out of fear no one would believe him, which is really odd because Emma literally has these text messages from an unknown number. So if there really was a kidnapper, they'd probably be able to find out who that person is pretty quickly. Riley doesn't even care to ask them any questions. And I think it's because Riley doesn't want to know the answers to his questions. He doesn't want to know how much the police know. After this, the police didn't really have much on Riley to connect him to the crime, and so they unfortunately just let him go. But then after this, they brought in Riley's two best friends, Noah and Alex. And Noah and Alex said that they kind of had their suspicions onto Riley because ever since Emma's passing, Riley has been extremely calm and collected, and it's just very off-putting to them. And so the police know that obviously Riley is not going to admit what he did to the police. So that's when Noah and Alex, Riley's two best friends, decide to team up with the police. And one day, Noah just texts Riley asking him, "Hey, I heard that you just got out of interrogation. Do you want to hang out with me and Alex at Alex's house? And we can all just talk about what happened." So then that's when Riley meets up with Noah and Alex at Alex's house. But what Riley doesn't know is that Noah and Alex are actually bugged and mic'd up, and the audio that's being recorded from their conversation is actually a live feed being transmitted to a van that's parked right down the street. So the police are able to listen in on their conversations. And on top of listening in, Noah actually started filming the entire conversation and set up a secret camera. When Riley first showed up to the house, he actually called Alex and told Alex that he wanted him to come outside so that the two of them can have a conversation before they meet up with Noah. And to this, with Alex knowing what Riley did, he starts to panic and he starts freaking out, and he tells the officers on his bug that "I don't feel comfortable going out there because my roommate isn't going to be home for another 4 hours. I don't know what to do." But the police assure him and say, "We're right down the street in case anything happens." Alex goes out there, him and Riley have a conversation, and then they go back up and meet up with Noah. And once all three of them are together, they start conversing over the whole death of Emma Walker.
They were playing the good cop, bad cop role. They legit, I didn't know cops actually did that shit, and they did. I was like, I'm not lying.
Say it hits her in the stomach. Say somebody shot her on the wall, hit her in the stomach. She's going to wake up. You don't just get shot and lay there.
Yeah, I don't see how she wouldn't scream or something, like anything.
And she just lay.
Unless it was just a ridiculous shot.
If it hit her in the head, then they would have saw that.
Well, yeah, but you don't know
that, though. You're thinking about how she was found or when she was found.
Because
whenever you hear,
exactly. Whatever
they always knew it was
whoever you hear it from could not be true.
But I'm trusting you guys, with my life, because this is 70 years in jail if I get convicted of something I did do. And are you busy right now? Are you about to do anything? Well, can we go to the bluffs? Because I need to get rid of the gun. The bluff. I'm gonna throw it into the water. They'll never find me. I just need
Jesus Christ, dude. I got that.
If it's in the Tennessee River, they will never find it. So that's why I just want to eliminate that from the equation as a whole.
Basically, I mean, I feel you. That's your decision.
Riley starts conversing and telling his friends if they could help Riley dispose of a gun into the Tennessee River, claiming that no one will find it. And when the friend asks Riley, why do you need to dispose the gun? Riley just says that he can't explain it. He just needs them to go with him to dispose of the gun. And a couple days prior to this, in interrogation, Noah and Alex had even told investigators that Riley had mentioned that he did have a gun, but they just thought that maybe Riley was lying about it because that was something that Riley had lied about in the past. And in the interrogation, detectives even brought up the fact that Riley claimed to have a gun, to which Riley had said that, oh, well, I don't actually have a gun. I just told that to my friends, but no, I actually don't have one, when in reality, he actually did have a gun because, as you just saw, all three of them are about to go dispose of this gun. And even after Riley's interrogation, he had texted Noah saying, quote, why did you tell them about the gun? They think I shot her because of it. Please text me back. Noah's response to these messages say, quote, if you didn't do anything, you have nothing to hide, bro, and I figured you might use it to yourself after all of this happened. I'm worried about you. Dude, why did you tell me you were trying to get rid of the gun? And you lied and said that you already gave it back to your grandpa, and then your mom came outside and she couldn't find it anywhere. After this, Riley then tries to convince his friends to lie to the police for him, and Riley goes on to tell Noah and Alex that if they are questioned by the police again, since they've already said too much, they need to tell the police that they were on acid and they were drunk at the time of the interrogation, so they didn't really know what they were saying and if they were saying things correctly, and that they don't know anything about Riley and they don't know anything about what he did.
I guess I thought I heard something about a gun and his grandfather thinking that he took it. You know, if you tell them you're on LSD, you were drunk and you're high, your mind was altered. Whatever statement you give them wasn't a straightforward answer. If you just tell them that you were on acid, high and drunk, and just you didn't really understand what I was saying, you just kind of went along with it, I just tell them I was the only sober person here. And I guess I'll talk to Isaac, because Isaac's going to be sketchy about that too, with telling the cops that he was on a drug, but I'll talk to him another time.
Now, obviously, Riley is very capable of disposing the gun by himself. If he wanted to, he could easily get in his car, take the gun down to the Tennessee River and dispose of it, and then no one would know about it. But the fact that Riley wants his two friends involved kind of makes Riley feel a little bit more safe, because at least if he's doing it with his friends, you know, if I go down, then all of us go down, and that brings comfort to Riley. So he wanted his friends to be there just in case something happened, and also so that he doesn't have to go through it alone. And at one point, I don't know if it's Noah or Alex that says this, but one of them actually tells Riley and apologizes and says, oh, you know, bro, I'm really sorry about what happened to Emma. And for some reason, Riley could care less.
What about him, dog? I want to be so upset and I can't, because I'm more worried about getting arrested and putting away for murder that I didn't commit. Never in my life would I kill someone that I love that much.
Love you, bro. It sucks you gotta deal with all this, man.
And Riley goes on to say that he doesn't really care about Emma's passing too much, because his main concern is to make sure that he doesn't get arrested. But what Riley doesn't know is that 30 minutes after he says that, he would be in police custody going off to the police station. After this conversation, that's when the three boys decide to pack up all their things. They actually eat a couple of Hot Pockets before they go. They get into Riley's car and they drive down to the Tennessee River with the police slowly following behind them. The police again are listening into the conversation, so they know exactly what's going on. They go into the Tennessee River, they park, and then that's when Riley goes into the back seat and pulls out a gun. And even in the audio clip of this, you can hear how one of Riley's friends, again, I don't know if it's Noah or Alex, but they seem very surprised that he actually does have a gun. Before Riley goes to dismember the gun and throw the pieces away in the Tennessee River, is when police begin to approach. Under the seat of Riley's driver's seat was a Glock 9mm pistol, and when tested, this gun's bullet casings matched the same exact bullet casings that was found at the crime scene on the floor that I showed you earlier. And on top of all of this gun's serial number was actually reported missing the day before Emma's murder, and it was reported missing by Riley's grandfather. When investigating Riley's car, police ended up finding a pair of gloves, all black clothing, the same black clothing that was found on the security camera footage. There was that mystery man all dressed in black that was walking around Emma's house. The police ended up finding the same exact outfit in Riley's car. So now that Riley's back in police custody for a second time, they know for a fact that he was the one that killed Emma. But what they don't really know of is why. If this really was just a bad breakup, what made Riley go the extra extent to kill Emma? Emma's friends would also be interviewed, and they would go on to say that Riley was a very protective and over-controlling boyfriend. Riley had to know everything that Emma was doing, everything that she was doing, who she was with, who she was talking to, and Emma's mom even went on to say that at one point in Emma and Riley's relationship, Riley even controlled what Emma wore and picked out her clothes every single day to make sure that he knew that she was wearing appropriate clothing. And it slowly started to become that Riley was more treating Emma like a possession rather than a person, that she was in safe hands, aka in his hands. He always had to make sure that she was actually talking to who she says she was talking to, who she was hanging out with, what day she had football games on, and where she was going afterwards. But as I said, Emma was a social butterfly, and she had lots of friends and lots of people to hang out with. A lot of people loved Emma, and because of this, Riley then started to isolate Emma from all of her friends and family. And Emma also had to ask Riley's permission for everything. She had to ask his permission whenever she wanted to hang out with friends, if she wanted to go to the mall, if she wanted to hang out with her family. She also had to report to him every time that she had cheer practice, every time that she had a game. She also had to send pictures to Riley just to prove that she was exactly where she said she was, kind of like a very strict and over-controlling parent. And Emma's family actually hated Riley because for the past 2 years, they weren't really dating continuously for 2 years. It was more just on and off, and the first time that they had broken up, they actually broke up because Emma found out that Riley had cheated on her. So ever since then, Emma's family hated Riley, but then Emma ended up getting back with Riley, and it just kind of was like that for 2 years. But towards the end of their relationship is when Emma really started to realize her worth. She started to put her foot down. She started to clock all of his manipulation tactics. She started just going wherever she wanted and didn't have to report to him for anything anymore. And the moment that Riley felt that he was no longer in control of Emma is when he started to panic. He noticed that his techniques that he was using on Emma before wasn't working anymore, and it started to make him nervous because it started to make him think that maybe Emma actually was leaving for good this time. Riley would text things to Emma saying, quote, "I hate you. I hate everything about you." And quote, "You're the biggest bee I've ever come in contact with." And between those texts, he would also send very heartfelt messages like, quote, "I'm sorry. You know I love you. I just get worked up sometimes. Let's work this out. I promise. You know me. You know I'll do anything for you. I'm in love with you." And then once he didn't get a response from that text message, he followed up with another message saying, quote, "You're dead to me, ... I'll check the obituary, F you." And Emma also wasn't replying to any of Riley's text messages as well because Emma had actually showed her parents the text messages that she was receiving from Riley, and any parent that reads these messages being sent to their child, they immediately don't want them talking to them. So that's when her parents decided to take away Emma's phone just for temporary so that she doesn't get the urge to call or text him or even respond to any of his calls and texts. But since Riley didn't know that Emma's phone was taken away, he just kind of took this as Emma ignoring him. And I know a lot of people look at a situation like this and you think to yourself, who would be in a relationship like this? Why do people consistently go back to people who treat them like this? I feel like something that a lot of people don't understand is that usually in abusive relationships, it's not necessarily abusive 24/7. A lot of abusers and a lot of people who do have very controlling and possessive instincts, they typically have a loving side to them. And sometimes if they are with a person who has a good heart, like Emma, they will really cling on to that loving side and see them as a person who is not an abuser, but just someone who's misunderstood with a loving side. But the thing is that loving side that they show, it's literally just a persona that they keep up so that they could still continue to be with the person that they're with and convince them that they are this loving and caring person, all while trying to convince themselves as well that they are a loving person. If the abuser knows you through and through, they know exactly how to hurt you, but they know also exactly how to make you stay. They will do something terrible to their partner, and even though they do this bad thing, as soon as they're called out for doing this bad thing, typically they will get angry and they will explode, but then they'll quickly realize what they just did, so they'll immediately show their loving side. They will buy them nice things, they will tell them nice things, they will give them compliments, and then kind of create a tunnel vision of love for this person. So the only things that their partner sees or can remember clearly is the good things that this person is doing for them. But in reality, they're just doing good thing after good thing after good thing to sort of drown out the bad thing that they did. And then the person slowly forgets about the bad thing that they did and then continues to be in a relationship with them. So he would do things for her like send her food to work, buy her flowers, buy her brand new Adidas shoes for cheer practice. And he would do all of these little things to make it look like he cared or to make it look like he was just misunderstood with anger issues and it was his upbringing that made him like this. But in reality, he's just doing these things to win her back so that she doesn't leave for good. But Riley slowly started to figure out that this breakup was for good because all of his usual tactics would no longer work. He would send her flowers and she would just throw them away. He would send her food at work and she would just give it to someone else to eat. He would compliment her and tell her how much he loved her, and he was met with no response. And so when he felt that it was completely over, usually people who go through a breakup, they go through the motions, they deal with it how they need to, and then they eventually move on and go to someone else. At the end of the day, both parties just go off and live their own separate lives. But for Riley, he didn't view Emma as a human being. He viewed her as a possession. It felt like something had been taken away from him and stolen from him. And he didn't really know why. And he refused to look at himself as the problem. It wasn't his problem because he was the one that was in control. He was the one that was controlling everything. But now that he's not in control, he still refuses to see himself as the problem and tries all in his power to regain that control again. And he did this by killing Emma. During Riley's second interrogation, he was actually questioned about his grandfather's missing gun and if he knew anything about that. And Riley said that his grandfather did have a collection of guns, but Riley doesn't remember really seeing if any of them were missing on the Friday that he claimed he went over to his grandfather's house. Riley goes on to tell a story about how his car was in desperate need of an oil change. So Riley's grandfather decided to drive out to Riley's school, switch cars with Riley. The grandfather would get into Riley's car, he would drive Riley's car to get an oil change and then come back and switch back into his car. But when he did that, he realized that in his glove box, his gun was gone. So he immediately called Riley and asked him, "Hey, have you seen my gun? It was in the glove box. Did you ride in my car at all?" But Riley says, "No, I did not touch your car. I've literally just been in class this whole time." So that's when Riley's grandfather, named James, called the police and report the serial number of the gun that was missing. So as you can tell from Riley's story, he's sort of all over the place, but this is actually what happened. On Friday night, Riley did indeed go over to his grandparents' house, and then later on that night, he actually did go to Noah's house to spend the night from Friday to Saturday. But when he did, he had basically faked his own kidnapping. Apparently, Emma would always go after football games to this very specific friend's house, and so Riley just kind of took a guess and assumed it's a Friday night, she probably had a game, so that means she's probably at this friend's house. So then he starts texting Emma off of an unknown number all of these random texts about how these people have someone that she loves, and then when she wasn't responding to any of it, that's when this unknown number just calls Emma. Now we can probably assume that the unknown unknown number was Riley. So Emma picks up the phone and Riley just backs away from the phone, starts screaming, and then hangs up the phone. And then he goes into the backyard of Emma's friend's house and pretends to be kidnapped. But again, Emma is not falling for it. So she just straight up tells him, don't ever talk to me again. And then after this is when Riley goes over to Noah's house. He's frantic. He's saying that he got kidnapped and Emma doesn't even care. But Emma quickly realized that this was probably just a way for Riley to regain sympathy, because that is something that Riley would also do as a manipulation tactic, is that he would say things that are going on in his life or try to create situations that would bring him sympathy so that Emma would feel more inclined to take care of him, and then they would again be back together. But in this instance, Emma was not going to take care of him anymore, and so she just decided to walk away from it. So on Friday night, that's where he planned his whole kidnapping, tried to get Emma's attention, didn't work, went back to Noah's, spent the night. Saturday, he wakes up, leaves Noah's house, claims he's going to his grandparents' house, but what he actually does is dresses all in black, goes to Emma's house, and tries to break in. He wasn't actually trying to break in, he was just trying to forge a break-in. So he would go up to the windows, start banging and knocking, going up to the doors, jiggling around, trying to open them, just trying to scare Emma. And then shortly after that, that's when Riley walked away, and then he got a phone call from Emma. Emma's on the phone, she's crying, she's freaking out, she doesn't know what's going on, and that's when Riley says, okay, I'm at Noah's house, but I'll be right there. Even though he wasn't at Noah's house, he was actually the one circling Emma's house and making her terrified. But then after this attempt didn't work either, because when Riley got there and the man had left, Emma immediately told Riley to leave. She said that she just kind of called him out of reflex because she was scared, but she still doesn't want to see him. So Emma kicks him out, and then that's when Emma calls her friend, tells her friend the whole experience, and Riley's attempt to get Emma back for the second time had not worked. So once he tried on Friday for the fake kidnapping, that didn't work. He tried scaring her by trying to break into her home, pretending to be a masked intruder. That didn't work. And a neighbor even testified to this as well, because apparently when Riley was walking back to his car, because he had parked his car down the street, walked to Emma's house, pretended to break in, and then walked back down the street to his car so that he could get in his car and like go see Emma to see what was going on. And as he was walking back to his car, a neighbor of Emma even looked at him and said, "Oh, hey Riley." And this masked man just put up his hands and started waving, meaning it was Riley that was dressed all in black. And so then came Sunday for his last and final attempt to get Emma back. He actually did spend the night at Noah's house from Saturday to Sunday, and then that day he actually did go to his grandparents' house and then get back to his dorm room between 11:30 and 11:45. But when he did, Riley's roommate named Mac, who was a fellow football player on the team, Mac goes on to say that when Riley came back, Riley had asked Mac if he could borrow his phone, because at this point, Emma had Riley blocked on everything, on all of her socials, his number. Riley needed another phone to call Emma off of. So he borrowed Max's phone and then tried to call Emma, and since this was a weird number, Emma picked up, and then they both had a conversation that ended in an argument because Emma still didn't want to get back together with him, so she just ended the call and blocked the number. And then after this, Riley started pacing back and forth and even asked Mac, quote, "How do you get fingerprints off of a gun?" And to this, Mac thought that this was a little bit weird. He didn't really know what to say to this. And in interrogation, Riley was actually questioned about this, but Riley's story, he says that it actually wasn't him that was asking the question, it was Mac that was asking the question. And then later on, Riley had even called his best friend Noah, frantically talking about Emma, and asked Noah the same exact question, "Do you know how to get fingerprints off of a gun?" And Noah too thought that this was a little odd, because to this, Noah responded with, quote, "Dude, that's a really sketchy question to ask." And so that's when Riley got in his car, took the stolen gun that he had stole from his grandparents' house just the day before, and drove over to Emma's neighborhood. And Riley's story, he claims that around this time of like 1:30 a.m., he was actually driving to his grandparents' house to log out of his student account and then go back to campus. campus, but his phone location would actually say otherwise. His phone location would say that Riley left campus at 12:13 a.m. on Monday, November 21st, and then his location pinged for a second time at 12:29 a.m. going on the highway to Emma's house. There were 6 more pings that came from Riley's phone in Knoxville, Tennessee, where Emma lived, between the hours of 12:40 and 3:40. And it's suspected that this was the 3-hour window Riley was talking about where he was just sitting in his car crying, but he wasn't in the parking lot of his college. He was actually in the parking lot of Emma's neighborhood. Then at 3:45 a.m. is when Riley's phone was pinged again to Emma's house before returning back to his college campus at 4:19 a.m. And so even though his phone location literally shows his whereabouts and where he was committing this crime, he still pled innocent. And Riley even told investigators, quote, "I didn't do this, and I don't know who would want to do anything to that girl," which is kind of odd, referring to the love of your life, your girlfriend of 2 years, as that girl. So it was very obvious at this point that Riley was the one that committed this crime. His phone was pinged in the exact locations of where Emma's murder had occurred. He had lied to the police about getting kidnapped and also about his timeline of where he was. He lied about not knowing where his grandfather's gun was, but then was later on found with his grandfather's gun underneath his driver's seat. The missing gun was definitely his grandfather's gun because it matched the exact serial number. Even on top of that, there was audio and visual confession of Riley actively planning and asking his friends to go with him as he disposes of the murder weapon. He even asks his friends to lie and cover for him, but if he didn't do anything wrong, what would be the purpose of all of this? And so that day is when William Riley Gall was indeed arrested for the first-degree murder of 16-year-old Emma Walker. At Riley's trial, his defense team tried to say that yes, Riley was the one that committed the crime, but his intention was not to murder Emma. He claims that the day before, when he was walking outside her house wearing all black clothing, he basically scared her, and out of fear, she had contacted him. So he thought that a way to get back with her is to make her very scared, and so then she leans on him. And so he claims that that night in Emma's backyard, they always kept the gate unlocked because Knoxville, Tennessee is kind of a very nice neighborhood. It was the type of neighborhood where you could just leave your stuff unlocked. You never really had to worry about it. Riley literally just walked through the back gate, walked behind the house to where Emma's window was, and shot twice at the wall. His defense tried to claim that Riley didn't know where he was shooting. He basically just shot in her room and was using this as a tactic to just scare her, but had no intention of actually killing or harming her terribly. But instead of just scaring her, that's when Riley's bullets had actually shot through the wall, through Emma's pillow, and straight through her skull, killing her immediately. And in the end, Riley was indeed found guilty, and his charges were stalking, reckless endangerment, possession of a firearm, and first-degree murder, and was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole in 51 years. And at the end of the trial, Riley was actually able to make a closing statement to the jury and the family, to which he had said, quote, "My intentions were not and never have been to cause Emma any physical harm. At the time, I wasn't very forthright. I caused her emotional and psychological pain during the 2 years we were together, but I never once even imagined to cause her any physical pain. My intentions that night were never to harm Emma, let alone take her life. I wanted to scare her, to threaten her so bad that she would have no choice but to talk to me again, to confide in me. I would be there to comfort her, to win her back. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about her or what I did. I know that I can't be forgiven and that this will never be forgotten. But now that the truth is out, I pray that it's enough to show that I never meant to take Emma's life. Again, I am sorry." And yeah, that is the end of today's case. I hope you guys found this case interesting, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I think this story is so troubling and so heartbreaking for so many reasons, because I feel like throughout all of this, Emma really was doing the right thing. She had confided in the people that loved her about her abusive relationship, all of the threatening text messages to her friends, to her family. Her parents had even taken away Emma's phone to make sure that she wouldn't try to contact him again, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. She confided in friends about all these threatening text messages. Her friend had seen Riley in her own backyard, just randomly there, claiming to be kidnapped. So even her friends knew how manipulative Riley really was. So I feel like Emma was really doing all the right things in this situation, but Riley just took it upon himself to choose the most violent and selfish way possible. Again, they could have just went their own separate ways and lived their own separate lives, but Riley couldn't really imagine a life without Emma because he didn't view her as a human being that would go off and do her own thing. He viewed her as a possession, something that was stolen from him and something that he claimed as his and he wanted back. And Riley could have easily done the same thing with his life that Emma was doing with hers. Emma was going out, she was hanging out with her friends, she was moving on, she was focused on her honors classes. She was literally focusing on herself and her life, finally, that she now has the eligibility to. But as far as Riley, he could not live his own life. He refused to live his own life. And so since he couldn't live on his life, he decided that Emma couldn't either. But those are just my thoughts about the case, and I would love to hear what you guys think about it in the comments below. But as always, that is all from me. I hope you guys have a very safe and wonderful day out there. And as always, I love you, I love you, I love you, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!